When I first heard the story, my heart sank. My mother works in a movie set. I know how often key, intelligent women are humiliated simply because they can be. This video is not just a story, it's a real life experience, compiled into a story so that everyone can learn from it and avoid repeating the mistakes of others. All names, addresses, and company names have been changed, but feelings are real.
I knew the day had gone to hell when the VP's son pointed at my Rolodex like it was a dead rat and said, "That's ancient trash. You're fired." Loud. In front of half the office. Kid had been there 12 minutes. I didn't flinch, just closed my binder, stood up, and buttoned my blazer like I was stepping into a courtroom instead of being tossed into the snow by a legacy brat with loafers and no socks. Outside, in the lobby, Barrett Granger, yes, that Barrett, was shaking snow off his Stetson and grinning like we were about to seal a billion-dollar deal. And we were. Until Nolan, a human LinkedIn profile come to life, decided he was too good for a Rolodex. I mean, God forbid someone around here remembered who actually built this book of business while everyone else was too busy pivoting and streamlining. Oh, and before I go any further, if you're the kind of person who respects people who put in the work, the ones who know which handshake actually matters, hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of folks listen to these stories without supporting, and trust me, it means everything to the team who puts this together. Back to the circus. I'd been at Wexley since the days when we stored data in metal cabinets and the logo was just a Helvetica W on a door nobody locked. I didn't climb the ladder. I anchored it. Through 4 mergers, 2 buyouts, and 3 failed attempts to turn us into a digital-first brand, I was the one stitching the past to the present. Not with noise, with notes. My Rolodex was more than a callback to simpler times. It was a living thing, current, confidential, and real. Each card had a history, a face, a voice I knew by tone alone. No logins, no portals. Just me, my binder, and the trust I'd earned the old way. Barrett Granger's card was in there, handwritten, on thick paper, because Barrett didn't do email, said it made men lazy, said deals should be talked through, not clicked. We met twice a year for over a decade. Coffee. Pie. Once, a 4-hour walk through his Montana ranch with no phones and just a legal pad. And now today, of all days, was the transfer meeting. Barrett's family trust was ready to shift nearly half of its assets, over 1.3B, into Wexley's private equity structure. All that was left was this morning's walkthrough. He'd flown in for it. I'd even polished my boots. So imagine the face I had to keep when Nolan, whose biggest deal was probably a fantasy football trade, walked up with that smug little smirk and said I wasn't aligned with the new strategy. His dad, Blake, just stood there, arms crossed like he was daring me to cry. I didn't. I nodded once, picked up my coat, and left behind the single most valuable client Wexley would ever almost land. As the elevator doors slid shut behind me, I heard Nolan say to someone, "We'll handle Granger ourselves. I've got a deck." A deck for Barrett Granger. The man still writes checks with a Mont Blanc and settles disputes with a handshake under God and sky. I stepped into the lobby and Barrett spotted me immediately. He gave me a warm smile, big calloused hand already outstretched. "Ready to go over those allocations?" he asked. And I smiled, not bitter, just honest. Actually, I was just fired. The way his smile dropped, slow and cold, reminded me of the time he talked a timber investor out of clear-cutting 700 acres, just by going silent. He looked me over once. No questions about why, just one flat word. "Fired?" I nodded. New guy didn't like the Rolodex. Barrett took off his gloves, one finger at a time, looked up at the shining Wexley logo above the front desk like it had just insulted his cattle, and then he turned, slow and deliberate, to the receptionist. "Get Blake Whitaker and his son down here, now." I said nothing, just stepped aside, folded my hands over my binder, and waited. The room got very quiet, very fast. Nolan Whitaker made his grand entrance at 8:02 a.m. on a Tuesday, like some walking PR campaign for nepotism and male privilege. Porsche keys spinning in one hand, a phone in the other, and a $6,000 blazer that looked like it had never been near actual labor. You could smell the cologne and entitlement before the elevator doors even opened. His father, Blake, our freshly minted VP of strategy, stood beside him like a proud show pony handler, watching as his progeny strutted through the floor like he was about to personally revolutionize wealth management with nothing but Canva slides and the world's tightest pants. I didn't look up when they walked past my desk. I didn't need to. Nolan stopped anyway. Stared, like he'd just spotted a rotary phone in a Tesla showroom. "This is pathetic," he said, half laughing. "What is this? 1995. He was staring at my Rolodex, not the rows of framed deal photos on the hallway wall, not the executive plaques or digital dashboards. My Rolodex, my binder, the one tool in that entire building with more value than his father's entire 5-year forecast. I didn't answer, just moved one card forward with my index finger. Barrett Granger. I'd updated that card the week before. Handwritten, in ink. Still accurate, still live. Barrett didn't like emails, said they gave cowards too many places to hide. If a deal matters, look a person in the eye, he'd told me once over a slice of blackberry pie, so I underlined that part in red. Prefers face-to-face only, just in case someone decided to pitch him with a QR code or a TED Talk. Nolan walked off chuckling. Probably thought he'd just discovered a new team mascot, the analog dinosaur. Maybe he thought I was part of the office tour, like a quirky piece of corporate taxidermy. By noon, he had a monitor the size of a drive-in theater and 3 color-coded whiteboards hung around his new desk. Blake made sure everyone stopped by to welcome the next gen. The real show came at the 301 strategy huddle. Blake took the floor and announced Nolan would be leading select high-value client introductions under direct mentorship, meaning he'd be waltzing into rooms he didn't earn, swinging around credentials he hadn't built. That's when I realized I was the one they'd parked him next to on purpose. They wanted him to absorb something from me, osmosis style. But here's the thing about legacy. If you don't respect it, it won't teach you anything. For 3 days, I said nothing. I watched Nolan give a 10-minute speech about agile monetization pipelines to the assistant portfolio managers and mispronounce 3 major client names in the same breath. I watched Blake beam like a stage dad while the rest of the room shifted uncomfortably. On Friday, Nolan asked me where we kept our onboarding avatars. I blinked. We use printed checklists and 15-minute partner calls. He smirked like I'd confessed to using Morse code. No offense, but you're going to be a bottleneck. That's when I pulled the binder across my desk, flipped to the Granger tab, and stared at it for a moment like it was a ticking clock. Wexley had been chasing the Granger family trust for 15 years. We'd never made it past phase 1 until me. I met Barrett at a conference in Colorado, handed him a real pen when his broke, and didn't try to sell him anything. I'd built that relationship from fence post to fund transfer. And now, some sockless startup mascot wanted to streamline it? I slid the Granger file into the top slot of my folder, right where it belonged. It was my silent protest. Not petty, not loud, just deliberate. If Nolan had any clue what that card represented, or what it could detonate, he might have thought twice before opening his smug little mouth. But he didn't, and I knew better than to stop him. Some fires need to burn on their own before people understand what they cost. 12 minutes. That's how long it took for Nolan Whitaker to launch his first official power move. I was still sipping my second coffee when he came strutting over like he was about to lay down a law written on a whiteboard somewhere in Palo Alto. Blake followed right behind him, arms crossed, jaw set, trying to look decisive. But you could see it in his eyes. This wasn't his idea. It was Nolan's little theater production, and Daddy was just playing along, hoping the investors didn't smell the gasoline. "We're moving fast here," Blake said, like I was supposed to take that as a compliment. Nolan didn't even try to mask the smirk. "You and your antique filing system are a liability." I looked down at my desk, at the binder, at the Rolodex that had outlasted 3 department heads and 2 rounds of layoffs. I'd kept that thing so updated it could have been used in a congressional hearing. And now this clown was calling it a liability? Then came the cherry on top. Nolan extended his arm, not a handshake, a finger, pointing. "You're done here. No paperwork, no HR, no private meeting, just a self-appointed prince shouting exile across the floor like we were in a Roman Colosseum instead of a financial firm in Chicago." The office went silent. A few people peeked over their cubicle walls, mouths slightly open. One analyst actually took out her AirPods. That's how rare real drama was on our floor. I didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood up, pulled my blazer from the back of my chair, and picked up the one thing that still mattered, my binder. I walked past them both, through the glass doors, down the marble hallway, and into the lobby. And there, like divine timing with a middle finger attached, stood Barrett Granger, brushing snow off his Stetson, dressed in a weathered shearling coat that probably cost more than Nolan's car. He saw me and smiled. Ready to go over those allocations? That man had flown halfway across the country. For me. For the relationship I'd spent 12 years building. For the trust I'd earned, not with platforms or marketing decks, but over meals, ranch visits, and answering the damn phone when it rang after 5 p.m. And now? Now I was supposed to walk him into a conference room filled with the same idiots who thought customized outreach meant a MailChimp template? I glanced back toward the elevator, then turned back to Barrett. Actually, I was just fired. Just like that. No drama, no tears, no explanation. Barrett froze. His hands, still dusted with snow, stopped mid-motion. He looked me over. Not in disbelief, just calculation. He was a rancher, after all. He knew what it looked like when someone shot their own foot off. Fired? He asked, calm and low. I nodded. The new guy didn't like my Rolodex. His eyes traveled slowly up to the company name etched in brass behind the front desk. Wexley Capital Advisors. That logo had hung there longer than Nolan had been legally allowed to drink. And in that silence, I saw it. The shift. Barrett took off his gloves, methodical, one finger at a time, and stepped toward the front desk like he was about to ask for a drink, not deliver a corporate execution. That's when I knew they hadn't just lost an employee, they'd just lit a match at the edge of their own oil field. And the fire hadn't even started yet. Barrett didn't flinch, not a single twitch in that weather-worn face of his, just stood there in the lobby, snow still melting off his coat, and said one word. Fired? Flat. No shock, no emotion, just enough weight behind it to make the temperature in the room drop by 5 degrees. I nodded once. New guy didn't like the Rolodex. For a second, I thought maybe he'd laugh. Maybe he'd brush it off, crack some dry rancher joke about city boys and their digital delusions. But he didn't. Instead, he took off his gloves, slow, like he was undressing a problem he already planned to bury. Thumb by thumb, then palm, folded them neatly. Then he looked up at the Wexley logo etched above the front desk, like it personally owed him money. You could feel the air tighten. Receptionist shifted in her chair. A couple interns froze mid-conversation by the elevators. Then, calm as sunrise on frost, he turned to the young woman behind the desk and said, "Get Blake Whitaker and his son down here." She blinked. "Sir, they're in a meeting with—" "I didn't ask what they were in," Barrett said, eyes never leaving the Wexley lettering. "Page them, now." She picked up the phone like it might bite her, started whispering into the receiver. Barrett didn't say another word, just stood there, hands folded behind his back, boots dripping melted snow on the marble floor, looking like the last man you'd ever want to disappoint. A few execs passed by and did double takes. One even stopped mid-step when he saw who was standing there, then retreated like he'd forgotten something in his office. I didn't blame him. Barrett Granger wasn't just a client. He was an event. When he walked into a room, balance sheets listened. Minutes passed. Elevator chimed. Nolan emerged first. Fresh suit, same smirk. Thought he was about to get congratulated for decisive leadership. He straightened his jacket, ran a hand through his perfectly sculpted hair, and strutted toward us like a man who thought he still had the room. "Mr. Granger, sorry for the delay," he said, sticking out a hand. "Hope they offered you coffee." Barrett didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even look at the hand. "I understand you fired her," he said, voice low and cold. Nolan's smile faltered, but only for a second. "Oh, that... Yes, just aligning with new efficiencies. We're really modernizing and..." Barrett stepped forward, closing the space between them like a slow-moving thunderstorm. "She's the only one here I ever trusted with my handshake," he said, each word deliberate, carved in ice. "And you threw her out like she was yesterday's junk mail." Blake arrived just in time to hear that part. Face flushed, tie askew, he tried to step in. Barrett, if there's been a misunderstanding, there hasn't. That shut him up. Barrett glanced at me, just once, then looked back at them. We're done. Nolan opened his mouth, closed it. Blake tried again. Let's step into the boardroom. I didn't fly here for your boardroom, Barrett said. I flew here to meet with her, the only person in this building who knows what it means to manage a legacy, not just talk about one. The receptionist had stopped pretending to type. Phones were ringing unanswered. And still, Barrett didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just said, "Good luck rebuilding what you just threw away." Then turned and walked toward the door like the whole place was already behind him. I stood there, binder clutched tight in my hands, watching every ounce of smug drain from Nolan's face. No shouting, no warning, just frost. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet one in the room. I felt like the fuse. I stayed off to the side as chaos bloomed behind the glass walls of the executive wing. Phones lit up. Doors opened. Assistants whispered frantically into headsets. Someone even wheeled in a second projector like that would patch over what just detonated in the lobby. Barrett didn't move. He stood with the stillness of a man who'd watched storms roll over mountains and didn't bother chasing them. Just pulled out his phone. Flip style, of course, and pressed one button. Connor, put a full stop on all Wexley activity. No asset transfers. I want everything paused under review. You know the clauses. A pause, then a quiet, satisfied good. He hung up and slipped the phone back into his coat like it was a spent shell casing. Meanwhile, Nolan was apparently trying to reverse engineer a pitch deck out of Google search results and half a marketing brief. I heard him mutter something about legacy positioning and building synergy with the modern rancher. They didn't even have Barrett's portfolio notes. They had no idea he was days away from moving another $400 million in hard agricultural land rights through an equity bridge we'd tailored to his trust's generational tax plan. Hell, they didn't even know where the original term sheet was. Because I had it. I wrote it. I built the model. I hand-delivered it to Barrett in Montana after reviewing his son's estate exit terms face-to-face. And now they were rifling through shared drives and Slack threads, trying to piece together 12 years of relationship equity like it was a jigsaw puzzle missing half the box. The elevator dinged again. Nolan reappeared. Fresh suit, jacket unbuttoned just enough to look relatable. His grin had that oily gleam of someone taught to own the narrative. "Mr. Granger," he said, stepping forward like this was just a minor bump. "Apologies for the mix-up. Totally on us. We're still thrilled to walk you through everything." Barrett didn't move, didn't look down, just stared through him like Nolan was a menu item he never ordered. Then, in a voice that dropped all warmth, "You just fired the only person here I trusted with a handshake." He let the silence hang. It wasn't dramatic, it was clinical, cold, like a rancher explaining to a failed apprentice why he wouldn't inherit the land. "We're done." Nolan's face spasmed, just slightly. He kept smiling, but his hands started to fidget with the buttons on his sleeve. We'd still love the opportunity to..." Barrett turned. That was it. No yelling, no insult, just his back. He walked toward the revolving doors without another word, leaving Nolan standing there like a boy who'd just watched the horse bolt out of the barn with the gate wide open. Behind me, someone whispered, "Did we just lose Granger?" No one answered. Because the answer was already walking down the street in snow-dusted boots, while the rest of them were still figuring out how to reboot the damn projector. They thought they'd lost an employee. They hadn't realized yet. They'd just lost the deal. The CEO came down like a hurricane in a tailored suit, red-faced, tie loosened, phone still in his hand, barking orders to someone who clearly wasn't fixing whatever mess he'd just stumbled into. It had been 30 minutes since Barrett walked out, and apparently word had finally reached the top floor that the firm's crown jewel client was now a ghost. "Where is he?" he snapped as soon as he hit the marble lobby, eyes darting around like he expected Barrett to be hiding behind a potted plant. Nolan, leaning against the front desk like this was still salvageable, shrugged. Gone. He was obsolete. I swear, if the floor could have opened up and swallowed him right then, even the building would have voted yes. Barrett was still standing nearby, arms folded now, Stetson tucked under one arm. He turned slowly, calmly, and just stared at Nolan like he was looking through dirty glass. "Obsolete?" he repeated, flat. That woman knows more about asset integrity than your entire floor combined. No one corrected him. No one dared. The CEO finally saw me standing behind the front desk, binder in hand, looking more like a bouncer than a recently fired employee. His face did a twitchy little dance, half guilt, half calculation. Barrett didn't give him time to regroup. You want to talk about modern strategies, clean onboarding, scalable solutions? He said, his voice cutting through the air like a whip. That's all fine. But when I shake a hand and hand over a portfolio, I expect a person, not a platform. Silence. He turned to me next. Not in anger, not even pity. Just that same steel-eyed clarity I'd come to know over years of slow-burn business. You want to meet at the diner on 8th instead? He asked. I've still got 2 hours and $1 billion portfolio looking for a real custodian. My answer was already in my hand. I'll bring the binder. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. Not loudly, not with fireworks or press releases, just in posture. In the way the CEO's shoulders slumped slightly, in the way Nolan suddenly looked very small in his very expensive shoes. Barrett gave me a slight nod, then turned and headed for the doors. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. I followed, heels tapping sharp across the tile. Left behind the firm, the chaos, the scrambling interns, and the 6-month forecast that was about to unravel in ways they didn't even see coming. Wexley had the building. They had the dashboards and dashboards of analytics, the interns with Ivy League resumes, and enough buzzwords to choke a whiteboard. But they didn't have the deal. The deal was heading to a booth at a diner with pie that came in foil and a woman who still used paper, memory, and eye contact to build what they couldn't even hold on to for half a morning. Turns out, you don't need a skyscraper to close a $1 billion agreement. Sometimes, you just need a corner booth and the right name on the tab. The bell above the diner door gave a little jingle as I walked in. Binder in one hand, cold still clinging to the edges of my coat. Barrett was already tucked into the booth by the window, Stetson on the seat beside him, a half-eaten slice of cherry pie resting beside a mug that probably hadn't been warm in 20 minutes. He didn't stand up or greet me with some dramatic gesture, just nodded once and slid a sheet of paper across the table like we were back on his ranch porch going over water rights in the middle of a thunderstorm. "Scratch Wexley," he said, tapping the top corner. "Write in whatever structure you'd run if you were flying solo." I didn't hesitate. Took out my pen, yes, a pen, and rewrote the header. New entity name, clean custodial structure. Land trust terms preserved. No middle layers, no stacked fees, just clean, honest architecture. Barrett watched without interrupting. Not even when I paused to double-check the rollover triggers on line 6. His fingers just drummed the table once, slow and steady. I pushed the paper back toward him. That's how I do it. He scanned it, eyes moving fast but not rushed. When he reached the bottom, he nodded. Done. Just like that. He pulled a single-page contract from a folder under the table. No fanfare, no team of lawyers or 15-tab spreadsheets, just one document and his initials already inked at the bottom. He passed me a pen. I signed. Then he extended his hand. We shook. No cameras, no press releases, just that firm, honest grip I'd earned over a decade of showing up, listening, and not treating the man like a LinkedIn milestone. I glanced around the room. The diner was nearly empty, just a guy in the corner nursing a milkshake and an older couple splitting onion rings. Nobody here knew that $2-point-something billion just moved out of Wexley's pipeline and into a fresh LLC I would soon be naming. Barrett took another bite of pie like he hadn't just thrown a financial grenade into downtown Chicago. "You'll need office space?" he asked casually. "I've got a storage unit with a desk and a phone line," I said. He chuckled. "Then you're overqualified." I smiled, reached into my binder and flipped to a fresh section. Handwritten notes, first client, first entry. It didn't matter that I no longer had a badge or a company ID or a branded mug. The Rolodex had always been mine. The relationships were mine. The trust? That had never belonged to Wexley. I didn't need their fancy building or their client success platform. Just my binder. Just my name. Just a damn good slice of pie. And a deal sealed the right way. Across a Formica table, in ink, with a handshake. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the tremors to reach the top floor of Wexley's glass palace. Barrett's legal team moved first, formal, precise, and absolutely unforgiving. They issued a full withdrawal of pending allocations, all $380 million of it, pulled straight from the Q1 projections Blake had probably already celebrated with a press release draft and a catered lunch. The paperwork hit with the kind of weight you can't soften, not when your entire quarterly outlook evaporates in one envelope. The chain reaction was brutal. Client whispers turned into investor questions. Investor questions turned into board-level alarms, and none of them had answers that didn't involve the phrase, "fired her over a Rolodex." They tried to manage the optics. Phrases like strategic pivot and client realignment got tossed around, but it was like watching someone throw glitter on a sinking ship. Blake called me twice. Left a voicemail that started with forced charm and ended with desperation. Maybe we could talk, just clear the air? Nolan didn't call. He emailed. The subject line was, "My sincere apologies." The message itself? 4 lines of polished corporate remorse wrapped in buzzwords about rebuilding bridges and learning moments. Delete. Barrett, meanwhile, said nothing directly, but he posted a photo on his private ranch account, one I'd followed for years, but never once seen him use for statements. It was a shot of his boots resting on a fence rail, rolling hills in the background, sun dipping low over the pasture. The caption read, "Trust earned, not given." No tags, no explanation. But anyone in the finance world knew exactly what it meant. Wexley's stock dropped 12% that week. Analysts started poking at their pipeline, wondering why such a high-profile transfer had gone silent. A Bloomberg columnist used the phrase, "cracks in the armor." By Friday, the client strategy lead had stepped down to pursue other opportunities. I didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't leak a thing. I just kept showing up, quiet, steady, binder in hand, to my new office above a feed store in Bozeman. Half the size, double the soul. The phone rang daily. Barrett's referrals had teeth, real clients, no fluff. They didn't want platforms. They wanted memory, follow-through, someone who knew the difference between a name and a login. I wasn't rebuilding. I was rerouting. And the further Wexley sank into damage control mode, the clearer it became. The dignity they'd mistaken for silence had been the thing holding everything together. They thought legacy was a logo. Turns out it was a Rolodex, and they no longer had the key to it. The sign on my door just says, "Private Wealth and Trust Services." No flashy logo, no frosted glass, just black paint on an old wooden plaque that came with the building. The office smells faintly of pine and printer ink, and there's a dent in the baseboard from where I kicked it trying to get a stubborn filing cabinet open last winter. I never fixed it. Felt honest that way. It's me, a desk, a second room I call the conference space, even though it's just a round table with 4 mismatched chairs, and the Rolodex centered on my desk like a compass. Clients walk in, see it, and smile like they found something rare. They don't need it explained. They get it. Names matter. Paper matters. History matters. Barrett sends referrals every month like clockwork. He never prefaces them with emails or PDFs. Just a phone call. Got someone who needs someone. That's all. That's everything. One client brought a mason jar of homemade preserves as a thank you. Another brought his teenage son just to watch how this is supposed to work. No pitch decks, no onboarding portals, just conversation, clarity, and coffee that sometimes tastes like it sat a little too long. I log everything in the binder, 1 card per client, in pen, always pen. Wexley? Last I heard, they'd hired a client engagement officer, their 5th in 6 months. Rolled out a new AI-driven platform with a chirpy voice assistant that emails birthday greetings and offers customized asset updates in your tone preference. They called it Project Horizon. I called it Missing the Point. Trust doesn't come in a push notification. You don't earn loyalty with an algorithm or retain wealth by optimizing user flows. You earn it when you remember someone's daughter's name, when you know which side of the barn their grandfather built first, when you don't need a calendar to remind you that grief tends to revisit around October. I didn't upgrade. I outlasted. The world spun toward speed, toward glass towers and digital dashboards and sons of VPs with perfect teeth and empty eyes. Then the wheel turned again, back to handshakes, back to memory, back to names written in ink. And through it all, quiet and steady, my binder still turns.